You are listening to TMBDOS. They must be destroyed on sight. Discussions of an adult nature, adult language, and spoilers for the films discussed are most likely. Still on board? Come on in. Enjoy your stay.
They must be destroyed on sight.
Okay, welcome to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, episode 116. I'm your host, Lee. I hope you don't screw like you type, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. Spandex, it's a privilege, not a right Harper. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, although I just found out that apparently my teenage years are officially grounds for fairly well done, straight-up nostalgia pieces. Because I just clicked on the Netflix original series Everything Sucks, which is a sitcom set in September 1996. It speaks to me. It's just, it was a moment. It was a moment, It's basically Freaks and Geeks, but set 16 years later. So,
I think we're going to be talking a lot of nostalgia here.
Yeah, I think we've got a bit of that planned. So it does kind of fit thematically into the episode. But I literally just started watching it. My wife and I sat and watched it, and I'm just like face palming. Several points, just like, oh god, yeah, that was that moment in 1996. Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah. So we're going to be checking out 3 films tonight. We're going to be looking at Short Circuit and its sequel, Short Circuit 2, so from 86 and 88. And we're going to be looking at Hackers from 1995. So we're sort of continuing our little, mostly in the 80s sci-fi series here. And Hackers, I would argue, is definitely sci-fi.
Oh, yeah. No, I would, I like to think of this as the Fisher-Stevens trilogy. So.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that's sort of what it became. I wasn't aware of this, actually. It took me a few days to catch on that, oh, wait, Fisher-Stevens is in all of these, and that's probably why Daniel suggested these films.
Yeah. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I knew I wanted to do Short Circuit 1 and 2, and then I thought, well, as long as we're doing that, we might as well throw Hackers in as well.
Yeah.
From what I understand, apparently there is quite a bit of interest in us covering Hackers, so we shall see what people think of this episode.
Yeah, do have quite a few comments here. So first I'll get to one that was on our YouTube page. It was for our Simple Plan episode, and this is from someone called Clarence Peterson, who says, "A Simple Plan is an underappreciated masterpiece," which I concur. Yeah,
yep.
I think it is kind of is a little bit forgotten, especially in the wake of Fargo and stuff like that. Where I think that's the one where people mostly they kind of crime film set during the winter time. It's either Fargo or fucking
Ice Harvest.
Ice Harvest, yes, exactly. Our constant retweeter and liker anyway. I don't know if he listens to any of these podcasts. CB Fall says, amazing and honest reviews. I always thought Batteries Not Included was a weird movie. Didn't understand its premise. So here you go.
Okay. I don't know what there is to not understand about its premise, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, alien robots come to Earth and help out people in a building. I can understand kind of not buying the premise, but to not understand the premise, I don't quite get that. But hey, thanks for the comment. Always there.
To each their own. Now we have quite a few comments. I put a thread out there for our Facebook members, and of course, if you've not joined us on Facebook, They Must Be Destroyed on Sight on Facebook. Single best way to get in touch with us. But I put it on for this episode, and we got a bunch of comments from 3 esteemed fellow podcasters. At least I hold them in great esteem anyway, because I love all their shows. So first we had Darren Wilson from the Psychosomatic Cast, or the Psychosomatic Podcast, whichever way you want to say it. Even he doesn't quite know, apparently. So he says, do you think a rollerblading lobbyist was involved with making Hackers? I don't remember them being that prevalent.
They were pretty prevalent in 1995. I'm not, I think it's also we'll discuss this when we get to the film, but I think it's definitely tapping into a very specific subculture. And rollerblading was pretty, maybe 95, some of the crest had like kind of fallen by that, but like certainly 92, 93, it was like everywhere.
Yeah. And then Darren Wilson continues with another comment, this time for the Short Circuit films. He says, is there a deeper unintended symbolism in Steve Guttenberg telling Johnny Five a kind of racist joke to see if he was alive like humans?
I think the real subtlety there is that it's Steve Guttenberg telling the anti-Semitic joke.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird dichotomy there. It's Court Psyops from Cinema Psyops. He says, is there a role that young Matthew Lillard isn't extremely punchable in?
I mean, Hackers, I quite like him in this, but Matt Lillard is somebody who takes a lot of shit for stuff that isn't even, he does the thing he's asked to do, and he's very like kind of entertaining at that. I mean, I like him in Scream. He's just sort of, he's just the nerdy guy. He's high energy. He's got this kind of thing. And I think people I get people finding him annoying. There's not really anything you can do about that. But, he made a mint off of this. And he was the it guy for a while. He just kind of never found that project that, kind of made him into something bigger than he was. But I don't know, people who shit unnecessarily on Matthew Lillard just kind of like, you can not like him, that's fine. But I don't know, I kind of like him. So
kind of an easy target, really. I mean,
yeah.
You
know what really, really sucks? Nazis.
Yeah.
they kind of cheese me off, like it's whatever.
Yeah. Duncan McLeish from the podcast Under the Stairs says, Hackers is my motherfucking jam. And this sprung a lengthy little sort of thread here between all three of these gentlemen, which it became, I believe, a little bit of a back and forth love fest here between some of them, if I'm reading it correctly anyway. Court Sipes says the film Hackers got him into computers as a kid. Duncan McLeish follows up by saying, Court Psyops got me into extreme amounts of jerking as a kid and also made me question my sexuality hard. Now, either he's replying to Court Psyops here and talking about Hackers, or he's talking about Court Psyops. I don't know which one it is, because he linked the name and the Facebook.
Yeah, I choose to believe he's coming on to Court Psyops. That's my guess.
Because it seems to follow afterwards. Court Psyops says, Duncan, mine was never in question. I answered the call of my ancestors and knew it was always any port in a storm.
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate both the metaphor and the sentiment.
Yeah. And Duncan McLeish follows up with one of those do-it-yourself fucking pictures where I guess you can kind of put like a avatar of yourself in the picture, and it's the American Beauty image of the roses falling away from the naked body. So apparently Duncan McLeish is, here's what you're looking at in your dreams, Court Psyops. And Court Psyops follows up with a picture of Homer Simpson in a thong saying he's sexy and he knows it.
Yep.
Yeah, and
there's no better radio than describing GIFs.
Darren Wilson follows up by saying 1995, the year a generation got the hots for Angelina Jolie, which I think is pretty true.
Yeah.
And then Court Sipes says, just like 2015 Court, only not. Oh, you shouldn't be down on yourself like that, Court.
Yeah, I think all these men are incredibly sexy, and I would have no issues with engaging in some kind of relations with any and all of them, including yourself, there, Lee. I'd throw you a bone there.
Great, I feel loved now. It's good stuff.
You should.
Yeah. Thank you all for the comments. That was an amusing little thread. Usually we don't get anything that extensive on the Facebook page, so that was fun. Thank you, gentlemen. And of course, you get to be the lucky ones who have your show promos played when we take our break, because you were so entertaining. So there you go. Not that anyone listens to this podcast, so whatever.
You can all listen to each other's promo on this on this podcast episode.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can just move right on to what we've watched in the last little while. I do have some things, but I'm going to save them for like the next episode. And
Sure.
I know you have at least one thing there, Daniel, so I'll throw over to you.
Yeah, I just had one I wanted to mention. I have been watching a couple of the things, but I don't know. It's not always worth like chatting about them. But I finally got to see Get Out, and wow, like that's a really phenomenal film. One of the best films of its kind I've ever seen. Possibly the most uncomfortable I've ever felt watching a movie. And not, like I kind of heard people say that, and it's like, oh, because it's sort of quote unquote about race with capital letters, right? No, it's just the way the fucking film is put together. It is creepy as fuck. Some of the message, some of the way that the plot is constructed, and kind of towards the end, like some of what I think it might have been trying to say gets undercut by some of the sort of the structural issues, and I don't really want to get into detail on that for people who haven't seen the film. So I don't think the film is perfect, but it's very, very, very good. Jordan Peele, he is immediately like on the top of my list of interesting filmmakers, and I hope he has a very long and fruitful career. And that's, if you haven't seen Get Out, my recommendation isn't going to make you see it necessarily, but you should definitely fucking see this film.
Yeah, totally agree. I love that film. I can definitely see where you'd say there might be some little bit of distraction in way some of the plot is constructed. I mean, there is a kind of a and I don't think this is really spoiling anything. There's kind of a slightly hackneyed sci-fi sort of plot element to it.
I knew the twist. I knew the ending, which isn't really a twist as much as it's sort of like, I knew the underlying thing going in because I had already kind of like just been exposed to it through culture. My wife didn't know it at all, and so she was just like right there on the edge of her seat. And I was as well, but like, because I kind of knew what was really going on, I was able to kind of like keep a slight bit of distance and sort of, kind of process it both as, just kind of effective drama, but also, kind of knowing what the underlying thing was going on. And even at that, it was really like a real gut punch when you kind of get to kind of what's really going on. For me, it's not so much like that is done as much as some of these sort of metaphorical resonance about the sort of racial conflict that's kind of going on through the film in general. Like, it doesn't make sense that, the dad is like, I would have voted for Obama a third time, best president of my lifetime, sort of stuff. It kind of doesn't make, kind of character sense at a certain point. Once you kind of realize where things go. It does, but it doesn't. It's sort of, I don't know. I'm really trying to dance around actually like talking about this film. So I think maybe we just need to cover it at some point. Yeah. If you're interested in it, and kind of get into the weeds on it. Or maybe I'll just start writing about it. I don't know. Who knows? But I think it's a really phenomenal film, and you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's definitely one where you should watch it a couple times too, because some of those performances, they really start to like hit home when you discover everything that's going on, and you go back and watch those performances early on in the film. It's like, oh, I see why he's doing that. I see why he's doing this. It's pretty goddamn good. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So I did just want to call that out just because I did finally get to see that, and I agree with you. It will almost certainly be on my best of the year this year.
Awesome.
I can't imagine it not going. If it's not on my best of the year at the end of the year, we've had a fucking amazing year.
We had a pretty good year, yeah. All right, so we're going to take a little quick break. We're going to play some promos. You already know what's coming. And we're going to play a little bit of music, and we'll be back with Short Circuit and Short Circuit 2.
You ungodly warlock.
Broadcasting from the cursed earth, the Psychosemanticast.
Let us face, without panic, the reality of our time. The fact that atom bombs may someday be dropped on our cities. And let us prepare for survival by understanding the weapon that threatens us.
To have an ignorant, thin-skinned megalomaniac who sends off Twitters at 3 a.m. if somebody angered him.
Neo-Nazis turning up in Washington, D.C. to have a rally saying Heil Trump.
We talk about politics.
I knew I couldn't trust you corporate greaseballs.
We talk about movies.
can't come down here and arrest people just because of what they look like. Are you crazy? But that's police harassment.
We talk about political movies.
We're in trouble. The whole world's in trouble. They're all around us and we never knew it. You can only see them with these special glasses.
The Psycho Semanticast.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was.
How
gonna be
did
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Looking for something different in your podcast library? Then why not check out the Podcast Under the Stairs? I'm the host Duncan McLeish, and joining me each week will be a special guest as we examine some classic, old school horror favourites, as well as some modern classics. That's not to say that we don't tackle some of the, let's say, more questionable entries into the horror genre. And if all that wasn't enough, we have a subset of shows called Baz v Horror, where our horror novice, the Baz, tackles horror in all shapes and forms to see who will come out victorious. So what are you waiting for? The show can be found at podcastunderthestairs.wordpress.com and on Stitcher and iTunes. The Podcast Under the Stairs is a proud member of Legion Podcast Network. This is Duncan McLeish from Under the Stairs, signing off.
You ungodly warlock.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to be looking at Short Circuit from 1986 and Short Circuit 2 from 1988.
It's the ultimate soldier.
It doesn't get happy, it doesn't get sad, it doesn't laugh at your jokes.
It is quite simply the most sophisticated robot on Earth.
At Nova Robotics, the future is in good hands.
You're doing real good. Just keep working on those last 2 bars.
Thanks to Dr. Newton Crosby.
Originally, I designed it as a marital aid.
But artificial intelligence has gotten too smart.
No. It's malfunctioning. It might not do anything.
But it could decide to blow away anything that moves, couldn't it?
Because $11 million worth of robot just hit the road.
Wow!
Number 5 is alive.
Welcome to my planet.
You just have to find number 5, get some answers.
Why don't you come on in my house?
And it's got a lot of living to do.
Whatever it takes to put that stupid contraption out of commission, that's what you do.
Need input. Haven't had enough of this stuff. More input. More input.
And they can seem quite lifelike, but they are still machines.
Oh. Number 5 is alive.
Nice software.
How it happens, who knows, but it has happened.
A new comedy adventure from John Badham, the director of War Games.
They're gonna be after you. We gotta get out of here now. He's alive!
Ali Sheedy, Steve Gutenberg, and Number 5.
Beautiful.
Short Circuit.
I am alive.
Some say he's nuts.
To the moon, Alice!
Some say he's both.
Muchas gracias.
But everyone agrees he's America's most electric leading man.
Gracie and Holmes!
He's
the all-new Johnny 5. Just look at these items. Increased memory, 500 megabytes online. I come with a utility pack. Dozens of gadgets for outdoor living. Lots of Greenpeace stickers and even my own Nike swoosh.
Now he's back and haywired for laughs in his newest motion picture adventure, Short Circuit 2.
Winners all the time. Keep your eye on the red card. Red card. Get away from me. Kid, you bother me.
So keep your eye on the current thing this December. Short Circuit 2. This December on video cassette.
And I'll just go really quickly over here with some credits for both of them. First one was directed by John Badham and written by S.S. Wilson, Brent Maddock, and Jay Tarses. It's starring Tim Blaney as Johnny 5. Why did her name... Ali Sheedy, isn't it?
It's Ali Sheedy.
Yeah, as Stephanie Speck. I must have cut and pasted her name and deleted it for some reason. Steve Gutenberg as Newton Crosby. Fisher Stevens as Ben... And I'm going to go look at his name in the second one.
They changed his name for the second one, yeah.
Yeah, as... Jarvie. That's a lot easier to pronounce than the...
Yeah, I think it's Javardi or something like that for the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Batuya, apparently, according to Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. Fuck.
Whatever.
Yeah, Austin Pendleton is Dr. Howard.
Horrible Indian, South Asian stereotype. That's what his last name should be.
The weird thing is that they make, he's this brown face Indian character played by a white dude. But instead of they make him totally stereotypical, but instead of making his name like Deepak Chopra or something that's easy to pronounce, that sounds more typical, they go with this.
It's the Apu syndrome. That's really what it is.
Austin Pendleton as Dr. Howard Mariner. G.W. Bailey as Captain Schroeder. And Brian McNamara as Frank. Short Circuit 2. It's directed by Kenneth Johnson. The writers are Brent Maddock and S.S. Wilson again. And again, Tom Blaney as Johnny 5. Fisher Stevens as Ben. Michael McKean as Fred Ritter. Cynthia Gibb as Sandy Banatoni. Jack Weston as Oscar Baldwin. David Hemblin as Jones. Don Lake as Maniac Mike. Ali Sheedy comes back for a brief voice cameo. And Gary Parks as the priest. So I'll just throw to you, Daniel. I'm kind of assuming here that your story of these are almost exactly the same as mine, that you just saw these as like a teenager. And
I saw them as a kid. I mean, I was 6 when the first one came out. I was 8 when the second came out. I had already seen the first one by the time the second one came out because I remember seeing the ads and just like, oh my God, you know. So I was, you know, like so many things as we're kind of talking about 80s stuff, you know, we got HBO in 1987 or early 88. And so like anything that was sort of playing on HBO at that time just got ingrained into my brain. Right. And this was definitely one of those films, or both of these. I am embarrassed by my like degree of love for these films as a child. And for years I've kind of avoided revisiting them. And by years I mean over 20, possibly. Not
Probably
quite
the same.
But certainly since my kind of early teenage years, I have not revisited them. Mostly because I was assuming that these were absolute shit. Pleasantly surprised to come back, particularly for the first one. The first one is kind of the answer to the question of it's 1986 and we want to make a family-friendly film about the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
How do we do it? In 1986, you could do that. It's kind of a fascinating thing. It works pretty well. It's got it's got several really nice performances. I mean, it really is, you know, kind of more than just let's watch the robot do cute things. It does have quite a bit of that, but I thought it was even less. I mean, you know, kind of Batteries Unincluded went like straight up kiddified with this stuff, you know, and kind of had extended sequences of just animation with the robots. Whereas Short Circuit feels like it's a little bit more, they're kind of building a character out of the thing.
Right.
I mean, the animatronic, I mean, the puppet, like the actual like robot is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty seamlessly integrated into stuff. The work that went into making that thing do the things that it does is really kind of the pleasure of particularly the first film. But really both of these films, like it's pretty amazing about that.
They used every trick in the book to get these effects off too. Like every basic practical kind of cheat that they could think of to get this going, and they did it, which is pretty amazing.
Well, you got to love, I mean, basically the way you kind of construct this sort of thing is you kind of design the prop, and then you kind of figure out what the prop can do, and then you sort of build sequences around that, you know. And on that level, I mean, this thing, it flows really well. I mean, it's really impressive. I understand exactly why, you know, 7 or 8 year old Daniel was just mesmerized by both of these films. The sequel doesn't work as well. You lost your two most charming actors, Kalza Gutenberg and Ali Sheedy, don't come back for the sequel. Both of whom I think are really, really good in the first one. You kind of make Fisher Stevens our main character. You give him kind of a sleazy pal played by Michael McKean, which is the first time I ever saw Michael McKean in anything was this movie. So when I kind of saw him on SNL later, it's like, oh wow, you know, it's Fred from Short Circuit too. I like this one. Okay, it's still kind of doing the thing. It's got this jewel heist plot that doesn't make any sense, and kind of a finale that it definitely pushes the corny comedy just a little bit further than it can quite go. But overall, I think both of these are worth revisiting. And again, I mean, I think it is kind of the construction of the thing and the just sort of the prop and just sort of the stuff that's in it. Also, the second I found rewatching it again, I found it surprisingly heartfelt in the way that it sort of deals with sort of the Johnny Five's like kind of essential question of his, you know, kind of living status and, you know, the sort of feeling alienated. And that's something that I know that's what I responded to so strongly when I was a kid seeing it. And I was surprised at how much of that is in the film and how well it still was able to sort of work on me, even though, you know, I'm now a functional adult with the ability to like process my emotions and not through the guise of an insectoid like looking robot. But overall, I'm really happy to revisit these, but I probably won't be revisiting them again anytime soon. But
yeah.
Sorry, extended, just kind of giving overall thoughts on the whole.
No, that's great. Yeah, I owned the first one on VHS, and I had it for the longest time. Actually, I might still have it, honestly.
We had recorded both of them off of HBO, so I had these on like almost a constant loop as a kid.
Yeah. And I want to say that I saw the second one in theaters, but I can't confirm that. I saw a lot of stuff in theaters right around the time where my memory's just totally fucking cloudy from, you know, so, you know, early teens and stuff like that too. You know, it's just like, maybe I saw it. I know I saw Jurassic Park. I saw the fourth Jaws movie. I do know some that I did see in the theater, but this one I'm a little hazy on. I surprisingly, and I shouldn't be too surprised because I think the first one's a genuine, really well done movie. It is dumbed down into a kids movie on purpose, although apparently the original script was much more serious and much more it dug a lot deeper into Johnny Five discovering that he's sentient and he's a person, that he's actually alive.
I think it seems like the original script seems to be a little more Starman-y or, something.
Right.
Like it seems like it kind of delves into a little bit more of the... It becomes less of like, now let's do the goofy, let's make them into Three Stooges characters and like that sort of thing. Yeah.
And it's got that sort of basic ET structure plot that was used for so many movies in the 80s, where, and I mean, even Johnny Five kind of looks like fucking ET with the extended head shape and stuff, right?
I never put that together because ET is not a giant part of my childhood for whatever reason. It just wasn't when I rewatched a bunch. But yeah, no, absolutely. It's very, let's do metal ET. That's kind of what the design is.
Kind of is. And I mean, and I'll admit this, first movie I ever saw in a drive-in was E.T. And I cried like a little bitch because I was just a little kid. And oh no, E.T., don't leave, E.T. And it was really sad.
There's no shame in I can movies today. Come on.
But man, honestly, I like this way better than E.T. I like how Johnny Five develops. I like how it's very subtle too. Like there's a lot of nuance in this that I wouldn't have picked up.
Are you talking about the first one or both of them together? Okay, just the first one.
First one for the most part. There's a little bit second one too, but the first
the second one he kind of becomes like a joke machine, But I agree on the first one. He really becomes like a real character.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, there's actual real attention to detail here and character building for Johnny Five in the first film, and the little subtle things like how he refers to himself in the third person, but then he starts referring to himself as himself, like the first person. It's very subtle little details here that sort of build. I think a lot of jokes actually land really well in the first one, especially. I was actually kind of surprised at the humor in it. And some of the humor is kind of raunchy as well. It's very subtly thrown in, but it's kind of raunchy. I think
finding Stephanie in the bath is enough, and
as incredibly embarrassing as Fisher Stevens in Brownface is, especially today looking back at it. It's not Breakfast at Tiffany's, but it's somewhere.
It's not quite to that level, but it's close.
Yeah, it's sort of in between Breakfast at Tiffany's and Christopher Lee as Fu Manchu. It's somewhere in the middle there. But for what it's worth, though, I mean, Fisher Stevens gives a great performance, and a lot of his jokes land pretty well. Like the humor surrounding his character is pretty good. Like he makes a good sort of funny sidekick that just has all these lines that almost sound like they're improvised asides, but they're definitely not. They're obviously written, but
he has to carry the sequel. He's kind of the lead of this. I mean, really, they make Johnny Five the lead of the sequel.
Yeah.
But certainly in terms of kind of our human cast, I mean, he's kind of the one returning cast member other than the people doing the robot. Even the director didn't come back. I mean, it's kind of like, well, we got Fisher Stevens. He agreed to do it, and I don't blame the actors. Like he's an actor. He's doing a job, and we're a lot more sensitive to this stuff now than we were in, 1988. And even then we still there's some really disgusting stuff that passes under the radar even now. So, I mean, it's not, I'm not giving the thing a pass for that, but because it is a terribly racist caricature, but it's no more so than Apu from The Simpsons, and that character has been on the air for 30 years.
I do love how when I think about it now, like iconic 80s characters that we all sort of have like nostalgia for. When you look at Johnny Five, he's almost the ultimate embodiment of sort of our generation's nostalgia with just all the pop culture references he makes, because everything he sucks in is 80s TV for his input.
Yeah.
And that's all that we fucking talk about these days now is everything we remember watching as kids in the 80s and shit in our generation, right? So he's kind of
and he does the thing that Daryl Hannah and Splash does of I watched TV for a day and now I have all these references of stuff. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? But he's also he's doing old gangster movies because that's what was airing on TV, at the time, so like daytime TV, he's like flipping channels and running across like an old Cagney performance or whatever.
And I mean, it's such a fucking trope of the 80s too, of these interesting, cute, non-human characters picking up pop culture and then regurgitating it verbally, in some way. And also just human characters doing it too. I mean, although Home Alone is 1990, still the main character in Home Alone, he watches a gangster movie and then like references that later, right? And Gizmo,
there is the sense that like the whole point is the filmmakers are hearkening back. The guy making this film is the people writing it are probably like 35 or something, in 1985. So they're kind of looking back to like when they were kids, like watching TV in 1960 or whatever.
Yeah, they saw Scarface,
Right, exactly. Like obviously the original.
The original, not the shitty Al Pacino version. Yeah.
Right. Another film we have to cover at some point is
because I just want to talk that film down. By the way,
well, we can do both. I would love to do both.
That would be something.
I've actually not seen the Pacino version. I've seen the original. I've not actually seen the Pacino version. But
I say talk down. By the way, just spoilers. Not because I hate the film, just because I hate how popular that film is with people for the wrong reasons, I think. But, that's a total other discussion.
That's we'll have to, that's a much more detailed discussion than we're going to get into right now. But I'm kind of right there with you on particularly Short Circuit 1. I think it's again kind of a surprisingly intricate. I really love Steve Guttenberg and Ali Sheedy in this. I mean, Steve Guttenberg kind of gets to become a joke, like another Simpsons reference. But Steve Guttenberg, is literally such sort of the famously, how did this guy become a star actor, that there's a gag in one of the classic songs from The Simpsons where the Illuminati made Steve Guttenberg a star. Who holds down the electric car? Who made Steve Guttenberg a star? But you watch him in this, and he's charming as shit. Like
he's sort of playing against type too, because usually he plays the wacky outsider who's really charming and shit,
Right.
But here he's playing the socially inept outsider, and so is Ali Sheedy, by the way. They're both socially inept, And so
Ali Sheedy, watching this and you're gonna go like, Daniel watched this a whole lot as a kid, and there's a very particular sort of Ali Sheedy affinity that just sort of became so much of my libido and interest just is very obviously. Watching it now, I'm like, holy God, was Ali Sheedy like the person I wanted to just marry for life, I love everything about that character. I love everything about this character. And Ali Sheedy is so good. She is so good.
Yeah, she's just
not given a ton to do.
No.
But she's arguably the lead here, right? We spend probably more lines with her than any other individual character,
Yeah, she's sort of a displaced hippie, kind of like she's a hippie out of time.
She's like kind of referring to like it's the Reagan era, and so it's all about nuclear proliferation and kind of like save the rainforest, and she's an animal lover, and she's got animals all around, and she's
got a dick bag boyfriend.
Oh yeah. Who totally totally gets his comeuppance in the film, and it's one of the best scenes in the film. You know, he's trying to like take her dog and give it to like
what a fucking asshole!
Like, God, what a dickhead that guy is. I'm glad you got lazed by number 5's giant military laser. If anybody deserves it, it's you.
I honestly wouldn't have felt bad if this turned full on horror and Johnny Five just fucking murdered him. Honestly, because there's enough serious stuff in this movie where you could actually see it going that way at some point, you know? Especially considering how all the other robots fucking act, where they just go into murder mode, you know? And that also just a testament to how expressive these robots are. I mean, they use several different heads for Johnny Five to get the expressions right, but the idea behind the design on the robot with the eyelash shade thingies that they use to give expressions and stuff, it works. Like, it just pays off in spades, the way they use that.
Yeah. It's an amazingly expressive model. I think the real testament to this is I buy number 5 as a character. Again, as a kid, I bought this completely. I knew it was obviously not a real robot, right? But I bought number 5 as a character in this film. And not thinking about, there's like a team of puppeteers who are doing who are doing this work. It's seamless. And even rewatching it as an adult, it just works. I can admire the sort of technical work when he's like picking up the wrench and dropping it on his power button and that sort of thing, and changing out the arm. And you can kind of see admire the technique being done here. But at the same time, number 5 verisimilitude has never dropped for me, in the first film. The second film, it pushes it just slightly over the edge. It's dumbed down quite a bit, and so without the writing and but even then, that's not the prop. The prop works. It's just it's more manipulative, and it's kind of playing a different game, and so it's a little bit harder to kind of feel emotionally invested. But certainly the first film. The first film is legitimately good. You could racism of the joke and of the the portrayal of Ben aside, I think you could absolutely show this to people today. I could see kids today kind of falling in love with
it is a legit good family kids movie. Once you get past a couple things, but I also, man, something I picked up also. The shameless product placement, especially with Johnny Five just reciting logos and shit like that. It's almost at Mac and Me levels.
I wonder though, did they actually get promotional, kind of credit for that? Because in '86, it wasn't nearly. If it happened today, you'd go, well, of course, Mountain Dew gave them the right to,
right.
And certainly they had to kind of clear it. But product placement wasn't where it is today in 1986. So I do wonder if they're just kind of repeating the Dr. Pepper line is not, Dr. Pepper paid for promotional placement as much as it is wouldn't you like to be a pepper too is the, sort of classic thing that people are seeing on ads in 1986. Yeah. And number 5 becomes, the thing that works about him as a character is he is just this giant kid with a laser, right? And he does the thing that kids do, which is, just watch TV all day and repeat ads. So,
it's exactly why he resonates with a whole generation that watched this film and still remembers it fondly. Yeah. There's no surprise there. As far as part 2 goes, I got to say, I think Cynthia Gibb is really good in that. And she's she's basically a good replacement for Ali Sheedy because she's kind of the same character, Same sort of independent spirit, quirky female lead
She defines flibbertigibbet.
Yeah. Also,
she's less the kind of Earth Mother, caring, thing that Ali Sheedy was, and she's a little bit more she's got the corporate job, and she's just kind of she's into kind of the quirky toys, and she's doing her thing.
She's still the corporate. She's still the outsider in the corporate system.
Right.
Yeah.
She's also the only woman we see in the entire film.
Yeah, really. Fisher Stevens in the sequel, no less racist, but. If
anything, it's stepped up a notch, I think.
Yeah. The weird thing is they kind of I don't know if you picked up on this. They kind of retconned his background.
Oh yeah, because he's supposed to be I'm from Pittsburgh or whatever.
Right.
In the first
here they're kind of playing him off as another 80s trope as the fish out of water character. They do it both with Fisher Stevens and they do it with Johnny Five, of course, in the big city, right? So it's almost like Star Trek 4 when Kirk and Spock are walking around the 20th century city or something like that. It's kind of that same idea of comedy, But Fisher Stevens is the fish out of water immigrant who's looking for the American dream now.
Right.
When it was established,
you were already a top-notch robotics engineer working for one of the most brilliant men in the world. There's no way that Newton Crosby and Ben could not have gotten some venture capital to make all the toy robots they wanted. It's
right.
So the only reading is that there was some fight between Crosby and Ben, and he kind of got kicked in. So he was fine, I'm going to go to the city and do. No, the backstory makes no sense on this. And,
it's like the Weekend at Bernie's 2 of the Short Circuits.
Yeah.
Which is just the weirdest thing to say, but also I got to.
The Weekend at Bernie. I love that. That's the go-to reference for the Short Circuit franchise, which It's just in 2 films. So,
yeah, it's just exactly. It's just, it's like Weekend at Bernie's 2. That's exactly like Short Circuit 2. It's the slightly lesser but still kind of entertaining sequel that kind of makes no sense and shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
I also got to mention fucking watching the second one, even though I don't live in Toronto. Like, this is one of the most egregious. It's one
so
of the more
obviously not New York. Yeah,
it's one of the most egregious fucking things, because right down to landmarks and stuff that I just recognize as being Canadian. Like, at one point you can see the CN Tower and for a couple seconds in the shot. Fucking Michael McKean's character's drinking Labatt beer, which is
when Johnny Five is like digging underneath and you see like the 3 cans of Labatt rattling. It's like, oh wait, this was clearly filmed in New York City, obviously.
I also kind of like how this film kind of predicts Home Alone, because there's a brief sequence where Johnny Five's fighting the thieves, setting traps for them and stuff like that. This is fucking Home Alone before Home Alone showed up 2 years later.
Yeah.
And they even have fucking Cyrano de Bergerac.
Yeah, of course, Roxanne was a year before this, so
yes.
Roxanne, another film that I deeply loved as a kid, and I'd actually really like to revisit that one at some point. It doesn't really fit into the sci-fi kind of bit, but,
we could put that on the fucking docket.
Put that on the master list. We'll get to it in 3 or 4 years. It'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I just want to say about the second film, fuck the idea of a robot saying "So help me God" in a Pledge of Allegiance. Like, what the fuck is that shit? Like that.
I'm endowed by my creator.
Yeah.
God. Yes.
Like, there was a surprising amount of like Jesus Christ mentions and references in the second film, right?
Yeah, Michael McKean goes like Christ, and Johnny Five goes Christ.
Born 180.
1 to 33 AD. Yes.
Like, dude, come on.
No,
I guess it's just the 80s, and it's a given that everyone says the Pledge of Allegiance because, Ronald Reagan. But,
There's definitely an element of that, and it feels like... I mean, it kind of feels first drafty, some of the jokes.
Right.
Like it just kind of, in the sequence when he's expelling the robbers for the first time, and he's, got he's spinning them around, and just kind of hear, like, Johnny Five's voice sort of doing little catchphrases, there's a hint of, there's a Patton Oswalt routine where he talks about how he was hired to be a script
I was thinking
doctor.
the same
He was hired
thing.
He was hired to be like a script doctor for this animated film, but they'd already like made all the animation, and so they couldn't afford to like throw in new characters or like do. But what they wanted was, can you find clever things to say that characters who are off screen can yell on the screen?
My bottom fell into some butterscotch. Yeah. The things this character never ever would have said ever. It's like
a whole lot of this movie feels like that personified.
Yeah, exactly.
But lately, I've been doing punch up on all these computer animated movies, all the like the Over the Hedge and shit like that, and all those movies. What they don't tell you is those movies are 85% completed. They're done. So when you come in and go, well, I would lose that scene, I would move that. They go, well, we spent $120 million on this. We're not changing any of this. Then you go, well, what do you want me to do exactly? And they say, we need you to think up funny, off-screen jokes that people that aren't on screen can yell over the unfunny, uninteresting action to make it a comedy. I didn't know you could make a comedy that way. I didn't know you could take depressing, shitty footage and have people just yell jokes over it. Like, can you take Super 8 footage of a kid's birthday party? He's like 8 years old. None of the other kids showed up. He's all alone in the kitchen with his little cake and his little hat to the side, crying. You're like, oh my God, this is awful. But then you have a voice off screen going, I just fell onto my bottom into some butterscotch. And you go, wow, a guy that I can't see, nor will I ever see, just fell into some butterscotch and is talking out loud about it the way nobody does. Like, can you take Auschwitz footage and have, like, I haven't seen this many ribs since I was at Tony Roma's. Whackity smackity doo. Or just show the World Trade Center collapsing and 8th floor, men's shoes, 7th floor, lingerie, waggity schmaggity doo.
So, and that's what I mean by it's dumbed down. I mean, there are some, I mean, again, like kind of Johnny Five's like search for meaning, you know, and search for his, you know, sort of personal identity. And the idea that he becomes an American citizen. I mean, honestly, there's a real,
there's
you know, resonance
to be
even
had
today.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's, you know, about, you know, who gets to be an American and, you know, like, you know, that's certainly not politically relevant in 2018.
No.
30 years later, if you think we've regressed on this issue, you know, but I do. So there is kind of a beating heart to this. I mean, there is kind of something going on, but overall, I think the film doesn't. I mean, it doesn't work in the same way the first one does.
You know what the biggest problem? You know what the biggest problem with the second film is? It's too fucking long. Like, there's 30 minutes they legit could have cut out of that.
It is.
It's almost 2 hours.
10 minutes. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a romantic subplot. I mean, I love Cynthia Gibb. Cynthia Gibb is great in this. And I don't have any. I actually kind of like the relationship that she and Ben kind of develop, and I kind of love the. Like, I always remember like the the sequence where they're like they play the musical tunes on the calculator. That's a really clever little sequence. Yeah. It makes no sense that, like, not only do they know the exact, you know, but they can, like, you know, tell her through songs exactly how to get to the place where they go. But it's a clever little sequence. It kind of works. It's the sort of thing that I totally buy that this robotics engineer guy would just kind of be able to do with stuff in his pocket, you know? So that bit worked for me. Again, big chunks of this work for me, but I think the movie as a whole doesn't, you know? It's almost like kind of Johnny Five is in one movie kind of doing the sort of goofy, let's just quote commercials at people. Yeah. And then, you know, there's a kind of a different about this sort of like nerdy toy designer who used to be a robotics engineer kind of falling in love with this like marketing person, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
and then Joe Thieves show up.
Yeah.
And merge the two plots together because
there's way too much plot. There's way too much plot in that film. And I think that's the biggest problem. Like, honestly, the Fisher Stevens, Cynthia Gibb story could have just been its own movie. It would have been much more interesting. Johnny Five is just in there as a gimmick more than anything else. And you kind of see this, as much as I love Gremlins 2, Gizmo is just a gimmick in that film. He's doing the exact same thing Johnny Five is doing in this film. Where especially the part where fucking Gizmo copies Rambo and, you know, puts the headband on and makes
it was kind of, the thing is, like, it's a little bit unfair to kind of judge it by 2018 standards, just because in 1988 the idea of sort of doing pop culture references as sort of like a source for clever comedy was still fairly new. Like the idea of kind of having these sort of pop culture aware characters, and that kind of becomes sort of the 90s indie aesthetic, you know, in a lot of ways, you know. I mean, obviously, you know, Tarantino and Kevin Smith and, you know, Robert Rodriguez and so many, you know, they just sort of like use that idea and kind of perfect it. But this is before all that. So it is kind of, I mean, it doesn't quite work. A lot of it is kind of cheesy and stupid, but at the same time, this was early enough that it does kind of feel like, you know, it worked a lot better in '88 than it does now, and it worked a lot better on me when I was 8 or 9 years old than it works today.
I like both of these, though. I mean, I definitely, actually, I'd say I legit love the first one. I think it's really well done. I think the whole concept behind it and everything is great. I think the second one just, you know, it just falls short because it suffers from sequelitis more than anything else.
Yeah, just, you know. I think the second, because as a kid, I loved the second one way more than the first one. And I think that, like, I am having a little bit of I'm just embarrassed about the second film because it's the stuff that's really bad in it is really, really bad, you know? And kind of the stuff that works is not enough to kind of get me over that just sort of personal cringe factor. So I probably would agree with you on the, you know, they're both probably worth watching, especially if you didn't grow up with them, you know, it might be worth it. Yeah, that's an idle watch. But the first one I think is legitimately quite good for the kind of movie it is. So
totally agree. Get to a little bit of trivia here. For the first film, $1.4 million of the $15 million budget was spent on the creation of the robot.
Yep.
Which
so like 10% of their budget. 10% of their budget is just on, you know, the prop that has to work, or else the movie is not going to work. And again, that's a completely reasonable, it's all on screen kind of thing. If you watch this movie and kind of start adding up all the stuff they had to pay for, it's not much. Like this is a cheap movie, you know.
And it weighed 250 pounds. If you notice, the sound of the laser fire is the exact same sound effect as the Ghostbusters proton packs powering up.
I'll have to go back and re-listen to that.
I thought that would be a good one for you, considering you just did Ghostbusters on.
I did. I recorded
consider the Reagan.
Consider the Reagan. So you know, I have two similarly named podcasts, podcast threads at least, and you know, I'll get to that at the end. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Speaking on Fisher Stevens' portrayal here, apparently there was major confusion occurring in India among fans when this movie was released because many people had seen the film, thought that Fisher Stevens was actually Bollywood actor Javed Jaffari. This was due to Javed being the spitting image of Fisher Stevens with his beard and round eye glasses. And he had apparently, that actor had just been in a movie called Mary Jung in 1985. So when people saw this, they thought he had moved to Hollywood and gotten a part there as well. And Javed had to confirm in interviews that, no, I didn't do this film. It was Fisher Stevens. So there you go. So, you know,
that speaks a bit to the performance, at least, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, honestly, when you think about it, it kind of says that it was this Javed guy just portraying. He looked legit Indian, and everyone thought it was that guy. It's just that he was portraying this very stereotypical Indian part for an American film.
And I can imagine Indian audiences like viewing an American movie with an Indian actor in it would kind of go, well, of course he has to do the racist thing. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just, what are you going to do?
But it speaks to Stevens' performance that they like that they would believe, like, oh, that's clearly an Indian actor, you know, that has some fame, you know, who's, you know, like, that's respectable. Fisher Stevens, kind of the standout star, definitely of you know, the second film, and he's got a lot of fun jokes in the first one as well. I think he was quite good in the first one.
And just a side note, Daniel, by the way, if you thought his performance was racist, we're going to be doing a film sometime down the line, which you're going to find even worse. There's a movie called Nightmare Sisters with a character playing a fake Indian in that film. Oh, Fisher Stevens looks like a legit Indian.
Yeah, sure. You know, again, I don't blame Fisher Stevens for it, and I'm not saying like this is the worst, like, you know, portrayal of a person from India ever. Like, I'm aware that it's not, but it is definitely one of those things that mars the film, and it is like the sort of thing that it makes it hard to sort of like wholeheartedly recommend in 2018.
Yeah, right? Just keep in mind where I was sort of referencing like the Breakfast and Tiffany scale with Mickey Rooney. Nightmare Sisters, this character fucking is neck and neck with Mickey Rooney as far as how bad it is.
Well, we'll cover that. Let's put that high on the list then, because I'm you're selling this to me in just the right way. Like,
there's a lot of naked women as well in that film.
Well, you know, that's always a selling point. I know you're wrapping up. Cynthia Gibb, I love her in this.
Yeah, she's great.
I kind of was looking her up. She's been kind of a working actress for a number of years. Like, she went on. She's a perfectly fine working actress. Again, someone that I kind of deeply appreciated in this rewatch. I did kind of like just watching her work. I thought she was a really kind of fun character. She's doing a little bit of that Annie Hall, but like updated to the 80s kind of thing, you know?
Right, yeah.
And the two actors we didn't talk about in the first film, Austin Pendleton and what's his name? G.W. Bailey as Captain Scroder. We kind of round out our main cast. I mean, you know, we've got Ali Sheedy, Steve Guttenberg, Fisher Stevens, and then like Pendleton and Bailey. These are basically our characters that we're going to follow through the film, and everybody's amazing.
And I don't think we even mentioned the Police Academy connection, did we? With Guttenberg.
No. I mean, at this point, like the Police Academy series was huge in '86, right? You know, it was kind of at the height of, you know, when they were just making those sequels every couple of years, you know. And I think, you know, it's pretty clear that maybe Guttenberg was like, well, let's just bring on my buddy G.W. Bailey. He'd be the good kind of hard ass in this, and it's pretty clear that certainly as a kid I kind of knew, because I knew the Police Academy series and I kind of processed it, but didn't think of it's just like, well, of course Steve Gutenberg, and then there's the hard ass sergeant.
He's one of two 80s hard asses that I always identify with. Don't identify with, but recognize and kind of consider. Him and the guy who plays the principal in the Back to the Future films. They're both the kind of small men who are mean spirited and are dicks to everybody, kind of thing.
While we're on the Police Academy films, I will make this. I'm stealing this joke from a political podcast.
Okay,
but watching this comes from before the election, but watching Trump's speeches and stump speeches, he kind of sounds like Commandant Lassard. Became a political candidate. Like everything is very, very beautiful.
Yeah,
I am excited for this very, very large crowd. It's kind of the same character, and when you realize that's our president, that's the most powerful person in the world is Commandant Lassard. It tells you.
Yeah, he was probably getting blowjobs from hookers under the fucking podium as well.
But a racist nativist Commandant Lassard, so not even like the sort of like amiable idiot,
Yeah,
but
like a good-hearted idiot. Yeah.
But the like actually harbors ill will towards the most marginalized people on the planet.
Yeah.
That version of Commandant Lassard. This is our president. So
he's the bizarre world Commandant Lassard. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also, for part 2, just a couple trivia points here.
Sure.
Like I mentioned, while it's supposed to be set in New York, the obvious fucking Toronto, Canada fucking locations here. In addition to using the tourist locale of Yonge and Dundas Square. Film also sets a scene inside the Eaton Center Mall, features Old City Hall and Roy Thompson Hall and several streetcars in the background of numerous scenes and public buses with Toronto streets posted on their routes. One scene filmed in Berkshire Park includes a shot of the CN Tower peeking out, like I mentioned, and all the vehicles have Ontario license plates. Like it's one of the more egregious films where they don't try to cover that shit up at all, right?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I didn't even notice the license plate thing, which is, surprising enough because there are like close-up shots of license plates in the film, and I guess I just completely missed it even on the rewatch.
Like there's actually a part of the plot that involves car thieves tricking Johnny Five into breaking into cars. It's
most horrible portrayal of racist.
Doesn't that make the gang and batteries not included look like the most?
It looks like the most nuanced, racially sensitive thing ever.
Yeah,
and the irony is that, like, Short Circuit 2, that was just like par for the course at that. Like, it wasn't like they were just, well, we need a gang, and so we're gonna go Los Locos kick your ass, Los Locos kick your butt, Los Locos kick your ass into outer space, and I just did like a French Chef version of that or whatever. But
it's all right. It's Canada. You can do that.
Yeah, it's fine. If New York City is so minor within this, I almost wish they'd just kind of done this of, I'm in Toronto because there's a big toy company here and I'm trying to sell. Like, I wish they hadn't even pretended it was New York, and then we could have had the French Canadian gang.
Considering our immigration policy and stuff compared to the U.S., it almost makes sense that Fisher Stevens, he loses his job, he can't find a job anywhere else in the U.S. He just moves to Canada, whatever.
Sure, why not?
And the final thing, producers.
I think he really just didn't want to go live in Montana with Ali Sheedy and Steve Gutenberg, who were clearly fucking constant.
Yeah, because Fisher Stevens is like, oh, she's very fine, Yeah, he doesn't want to be the third wheel on that fucking deal, The producers want Steve Gutenberg to come back, but he didn't commit to it. And 20 years later, Gutenberg apparently said he regretted not taking the fucking role. So there you go.
I wonder what the film would have been if, Gutenberg had been around. Would he have been like the Michael McKean character? Sort of, doing this kind of skeevy, I'm gonna, oh God, that would be even worse, right?
Yeah, I don't think he'd do that. I think, honestly, maybe if he had taken the role, probably Fisher Stevens might not have even been in the film.
Yeah, well, which would have been kind of a shame, because I actually do like Fisher Stevens here, God, does that mean he starts hanging out with Cynthia Gibb?
Oh.
And then Ali Sheedy gets to not be the Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I love Cynthia Gibb, but that's definitely a trade down, my friend.
It really is, and I mean, that would be one of those really terrible sequels where they have to write a character out because they didn't show up. Oh yeah, Ali Sheedy and Steven Guttenberg, they didn't work out. It's like, no, fuck you. They should have worked out. What the fuck's going on?
But of course, Ali Sheedy did like a little voice cameo for the film.
Yeah.
So like, presumably, if they'd given her some money, I mean, there's like kind of a good version of like Short Circuit, or at least a better version of this that's sort of existing under the surface. If like Steve Guttenberg had said yes,
there's a way better version of this film where Johnny Five stays in Montana and he gets harassed by cowboys and they turn it into a fucking Western with land claims and stuff like that. Like, that's the better version of this film that I want to see.
I love it. I love, I love that idea of like,
that just came to me. Like, that's what this second film should have been. It should have been Johnny Five in Montana fighting fucking people who have claims to the land.
I can imagine Johnny Five rolling himself into a saloon, like rolling up to a table, getting a whiskey. I imagine him like Django.
Right.
Like the scene from Django where, I need to stop now because I'm literally writing a Western in my head with, number 5 as as this Western hero, kind of being
the only downside of that. Yeah, the only downside of that is that he probably would have done the John Wayne impression way too much, where it would have got
Yeah. He kind of does like 1 or 2 lines, and that's enough,
Yeah.
I kind of think he would have discovered Clint Eastwood, But in the good version, we get to like, well, maybe he like discovered, real Italian westerns, and he started to do like the sort of. Like suddenly he's like the Great Silence or something.
Budget
Klaus Kinski alongside number 5 in 1988 in a Western.
Klaus Kinski was for hire at that point. That was around the end of his career. He was doing anything for money. So yeah, budget for the first one was $9 million, made $40.7 million. I think that might even just be the domestic thing, so I think it even did better. And then we go to part 2, and the budget was $17 million, and then it only did $21.6 million. So they kind of shelved the idea of a part 3. I know Johnny Five like appeared in like a commercial or something for some.
Yeah, I found that on the I guess this is the one like thing where you can say Short Circuit franchise,
right?
Because it's not just 2 movies. There was a Hot Cars, Cold Facts, made in 1990. It's a short educational film featuring the Johnny Five character, not even with the same voice. And like it's supposed to take place. So apparently it's something, I don't know, like whatever.
It's just whatever.
It was 1990. They got the rights to, it's kind of like how Doctor Who K9 just kind of shows up everywhere, because the prop is sort of available to just kind of go around. I kind of think that's sort of what happened there. It's
right.
Like, let's do a little short film about like cars. Let's do like a thing, like so it's probably something like aired on Saturday morning TV and was immediately forgotten until somebody added it to the Wikipedia page because people on the internet have no life.
The only thing that would have validated that is if Johnny Five just broke character and went, Johnny Five is a whore. Johnny Five wants to die.
No, imagining like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit style where Johnny Five is like a real there's a real person, named Steve or something who's actually like playing the Johnny Five stereotype, and so he's like rolling himself off and he picks up a cigar and he's like, yeah, I can't do this anymore, you fuckers.
Fucking Gutenberg, he got out when the getting was good.
Now I really want to see that. Like the prop is good enough. And like particularly today with CG where you can kind of make this shit seamless, you got to do the physical prop, but I now want to see like a series of Johnny Five movies. Well, they're written for today's standards,
Yeah, apparently there was talk of, I think it was in 2013, of starting a third film that might have been like a soft reboot of the whole thing, which was supposed to be darker in tone.
Of course, because that's how you do it,
Yeah, because you don't want to make Superman likable. You just make him a fucking dick and a hobo. Yeah, both these films.
Hobo Superman is good. I mean, murdering Superman is the bad part.
Murdering half of Metropolis. That's not Superman. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But yeah, both these films I think are both worth revisiting. Part 2, not as desperately, you know.
If you, I think part 1. If you haven't seen part 1, see part 1. If you enjoyed part 1, check out part 2. That's you know.
Yeah.
There's even a scene in a country western bar, which is a really good scene in a country western bar, and you know, one of the better scenes of its kind in the '80s in the First Circuit. So you know, check it out. And there are Three Stooges jokes.
Yeah. All right, now we're going to look at Hackers from 1995.
beneath the world we know is the world they inhabit.
Dave?
Yeah, Mom?
What are you doing?
I'm taking over a TV network.
Finish up, honey, and get to sleep.
They're hackers.
Hackers penetrate and ravage private and publicly owned computer systems.
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
It's not just something they do.
Sure this sweet machine's not going to waste?
Are you challenging me?
It's who they are.
I win, you wear a dress on our date.
And if I win, so do you.
They can crack any code. And get inside any system.
Hello? Mr. Gill, according to our records, you're dead. What?
But this time,
Come here, look at this.
It's some kind of virus.
Unless $5 million is transferred to the following account, I will capsize 5 oil tankers.
they just hacked the wrong guy.
Game's over. Whoever wrote this needs somebody to take the fall.
He's about to commit the perfect computer crime.
You've created a virus that's going to cause a worldwide disaster?
And they're about to take the blame.
A hacker planted the virus. But it's the perfect cover.
We're being framed.
Can we be allies?
I don't play well with others.
Oh, wow, we are fried.
Okay, let's nail it.
Now,
You're not good enough to beat me.
Yeah, maybe I'm not, but we are.
they're the only ones who can prevent a catastrophe.
I know how to stop this guy. They'll trace you like that.
Are you nuts? Come at me!
Unlike any the world has ever seen.
Never send a boy to do a woman's job.
Hackers of the world unite. Cops on the building. I need more time.
This is the end, my friend.
United Artists welcomes you to the new world. Hackers.
Directed by Ian Softly, written by Raphael Moreau, who's actually pretty well known for doing story editing on 9 episodes of the Lone Gunman TV series.
Oh, I did not know that. So,
I think the only other thing he directed was the it's either Ian's. I should have took these in my notes. I should have done a better job at my job. But
you're a terrible podcast host, my friend.
I am.
Because you know more than me. You don't know enough to really be authoritative on this, and so I'm giving you shit for it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Rightly so. It's either Ian Softly or Raphael Moreau had something to do with the sequel to Carrie in the 90s. Carrie 2, the Rage.
No, that's Moreau. That's Moreau. Yeah, I looked
okay, Moreau. There we go. Yeah. This is starring Johnny Lee Miller as Dade Murphy, aka Zero Cool and Crash Override. Angelina Jolie as Kate Libby, a.k.a. Acid Burn. Renoli Santiago as Ramon Sanchez, or the Phantom Freak. Matthew Lillard as Emmanuel Goldstein, or a.k.a. Serial Killer. Lawrence Mason as Paul Cook, or Lord Nikon. Jesse Bradford as Joey Pardella. Fisher Stevens as The Plague, or Eugene Belford. Laureen Bracco as Margot Wallace. Alberta Watson as Lauren Murphy. And Penn Jillette as Hal. I think we both probably had the same experience with this film as well, kind of, in our upbringing.
Well, let's do you first, actually. You always let me go first, and then I talk too much. That's my problem on this podcast. Is you are too polite to me. And so you're Canadian, I'm American, we're both drinking, and so I just talk over you continually.
You're a rude fucking Yankee. Jesus.
Yeah. I don't know, if it was just you on this podcast, you'd get way more listens,
Doubtful.
People just don't listen to me talk,
So the first time I saw this was probably the year it came out on VHS.
Yeah, so like 96 or so, yeah.
Yeah, and I rented it on kind of buzz of classmates and stuff talking about it because it was, the new cool movie that everyone was like, oh, Hackers is fucking awesome. And so I watched it, and I really liked it at that point. It was like just getting into high school or whatever, a couple years away from, actually a year away from graduation, really. But yeah, it was kind of a movie of its moment. Like I kind of want to resend now my comments about Johnny Mnemonic being the most 90s movie ever, when this is kind of the most 90s movie ever. Yeah, and I really liked it back then. I think maybe my opinion of it now is a little lessened because it's so goddamn silly and sci-fi in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it still kind of maintains a really neat charm to it, I think. That it's sort of never lost this film. Like it moves at a really quick pace. Like this film just constantly is going somewhere. Part of it's that 90s editing where everything's kind of flashy, almost music video kind of editing.
It's pre-Avid, but sort of post-MTV in terms of its editing.
Yeah, and I still like it a lot. I don't want to get too deep into it until we start talking about it, but I thought it worked for what it was at the time, and I think it still kind of works for what it was at the time, and I think it still kind of works as a legit kind of good nostalgia piece too. Just to see where all these actors went afterwards, and to see them young, and to see a young Angelina Jolie with some baby fat on her, like, yeah, I like that.
I mean the pre-plastic surgery, Angelina Jolie, the pre most gorgeous woman in the world, quote in quotes, Angelina Jolie. Yeah, no, she's pretty phenomenal in this. So
we'll get into it. Like I think plot wise, this kind of just structurally it kind of falls apart. Because it is kind of that music video style kind of movie, and I think like Johnny Mnemonic suffers a lot from that same kind of idea. Yeah. Like a lot of movies in this period kind of have that quick editing. Story is secondary. It's much more about how cool the visuals are, how flashy the characters are, all that sort of thing. But yeah,
well, everything in kind of the final third of the film, I mean, it kind of collapses as it like actually has to start to tell a story. Right. Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you just because I feel like you're kind of winding down. It's time for my history with this film is not your history with this film at all, and that was kind of why I wanted to get yours on it. And the reason it isn't is because I was never a computer hacker, but I really wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like I was the sysadmin of my high school like email server, at the magnet school where I went to my last 2 years of high school. I have spent a significant amount of my time like typing into like terminal windows, strange commands. I was going to major in computer science. I wanted to be a computer security professional based on not like this movie, but based on my genuine interest in just that sort of thing. And then just sort of didn't really like coding when I kind of started school, when I started college, and sort of switched out of that. I wish I'd stuck with it. I would have, and I wish I'd had better teachers is kind of the other side of that. I wish I had, my personal history is kind of complicated around that. A part of me still kind of loves that stuff, and a big part of me still loves that stuff. I hated this movie in 1996.
Did you?
Because it's so desperately, horribly inaccurate in terms of like anything that has to do with any of the technical side stuff.
Right.
And yet it's very authentic in terms of sort of what's actually in the script, up until kind of the final third where it just kind of goes off to they're tracking us through the worm, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that you have to understand is Raphael Moreau, he was kind of into this stuff, and he was into this kind of subculture, and he followed this for years and like wanted to write a script around it. So like when they're like passing around the books in the in that scene, all that shit is real.
Yeah, like, the Rainbow series or whatever.
The pink, the ugly pink shirt book, like all of the stuff that's like how you actually hack. Most of like these kids, what they're doing is mostly just getting passwords, impersonating people. They're doing social engineering is what they call it. That's exactly how the vast majority of hacking is actually done. Is you call somebody up and you convince them you're somebody you're not, and you get them to give you information that then leads you down another line. That's how this subculture originated. And then just sort of like being able to like phone freaking, which is, kind of using the tones to kind of get free long distance phone calls. All of that, if you just kind of ignore some of the, details of sort of, there are a bunch of high school kids who are all like living in one place and all that's like, that's just sort of movie logic, right? That's just sort of like, okay, we all go to the same school because otherwise the script doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah.
And there's another thing that we'll get there. But everything up until kind of the final third of the film is, again, on a script level, 100% authentic. It feels very, very real.
The movie talks the talk and doesn't walk the walk is kind of the problem, I think.
Exactly. So it's almost like I really love that. The other thing that it really does, and I was going to say this, but it kind of conflates the mythology of sort of the cyberpunks with this sort of club kid culture. Mm-hmm. And so there's overwhelmingly like white dudes in t-shirts sitting in their basements and like, racking up huge phone bills, dialing into like BBSs, gets turned into this like radically queer, multi-ethnic, thing that's where the drugs are not drugs, they're high-end computers, and that's sort of what it kind of becomes. Which, man, I wish that the cyberpunk culture actually was that. Today, all of these, basically the same subculture becomes, they're all neo-Nazis now, basically. Like that's just the reality.
They're all fucking assholes on 4chan and Reddit.
And I'm gonna recommend this now. There's a book. There's a brilliant book, written by Bruce Sterling, who is one of the sort of progenitors of the cyberpunk literature. One of the big influences on William Gibson, who is name checked in the film. But he wrote a nonfiction book called The Hacker Crackdown in 1990. I think 92 or 93. So right before the internet became a thing, about this sort of BBS and sort of dial-up phone phreaker culture. Interviewed a bunch of people it's available for free online. He deliberately made this available for free online. Like he owns the rights and put it out there for anybody to share. You can buy a copy if you want to, but if you Google The Hacker Crackdown Bruce Sterling, there are like numerous websites where you can just sit and read this for free, completely legit. Mostly, I did this to make sure it was still available, mostly on websites that looked like they were written in 1996 or so. So that's how you know it's legit, when they are like old school classic, websites. And if you are at all interested in this sort of subculture and the kind of reality behind this, it is worth a read. It is legitimately worth a read. Also connected to Sneakers, the Robert Redford film from 1995.
Yeah,
it's all the same sort of genre, and definitely check that out if you're at all interested.
So I was going to mention this is essentially the sci-fi Sneakers.
Yeah. Well, revisiting it now, like I rewatched it this evening because I kind of watched a bit of it here and there, and then just kind of didn't really get a chance to kind of rewatch it until this afternoon. I really enjoyed it. Getting away from the sort of the bullshit technical accuracy stuff that kind of threw me as a kid, and sort of the wish fulfillment fantasy of, and then we're all cool because, we're all wearing, kind of.
That's a big thing. These are the coolest nerds. This is the culmination of wish fulfillment for nerds. Oh, if we were actually really cool. This is the fantasy. The reality of hackers is in the final sequence where it goes to different hackers across the world communicating on computers. You were saying none of these guys would all be in the same fucking town. It's just a contrivance of the plot. The reality of this film would be all these idiots on fucking keyboards talking to each other for 2 hours. It's like, that's not a movie.
There's a really good version of this. That's basically that, right? I would love to see these sort of, and then we spent 2 weeks figuring out we were port sniffing and, all that kind of stuff. I can imagine some really fun stuff going on.
What's that movie we watched? Computer Chess, wasn't it?
Computer Chess, yeah.
That's sort of the realistic version of this, or it's the proto version of this.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of really fascinating stuff going on. Again, read The Hacker Crackdown. Like, seriously, read it. If you have any interest at all in the reality of this, there's also a book by Stephen Levy that's called Hackers that describes the beginnings of this subculture, starting around 1959, when basically the model train club at MIT was made up of two groups of people. One group of which were the people really obsessively interested in the details of getting how trains in 1865 looked, right?
Right.
And the other group were really interested in the switching systems that were designed to make, the trains kind of move properly. And that latter group then started working on the mainframes at MIT, both on and off the clock for classwork, and then ended up becoming the original hackers. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of really
sense.
fascinating shit in this background.
That's cool.
You know?
I like that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's real. Somebody should make a movie about that. I would love to see like a real, kind of version of this. I like this. I mean, watching it again today, I really like it. It's such the fantasy version, but it's so heartfelt and it so captures the ideals of kind of what the hacking community should have been versus kind of what it became to some degree, because it is radically queer, multi-ethnic, like people who are on the outside of their society, who are kind of banding together and going against both like massive corporations and a massively corrupt and evil government. And I'm totally down for that, guys. And it captures that, like the version of this world that this film captures is really impressive. And I mean, it does sort of reach out for the sort of better version of what hackers should have always been.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see where the government agency that's, cracking down on cybercrime or whatever, they would actually take the side in the end of the hackers and go after the people inside their fucking group that are trying to exploit all this and steal. Right. And they're using the Richard Pryor fucking scam from Superman 3 to skim money. And the Office Space scam as well.
Oh yeah. Well, Office Space was after this one.
Yes,
it's the same scam. Yeah, no, it's absolutely. And there, I mean, again, the first 2/3 of this film. I mean, if you kind of abstract, like, oh, they've got to make it visually interesting, and I actually like kind of the visuals in this. I kind of like the visual style.
And
sort of
a lot of it's not CGI. A lot of it's actually
it's not. In 1995, there was a thing I read that the director said, like, I didn't use any like computer graphic generated stuff just because it all looked really fake. Like if you think 1995, if you like Lawnmower Man style,
right?
Like let's look at what VR looks like. So instead, they made like little props and models and motion controlled cameras that kind of did things that look like better versions of some of the computer generated imagery. And the actual computer-generated imagery looks.
That really, for me, that harkens back to John Carpenter with Escape from New York, where you have that initial sort of sci-fi computer. It's supposed to be computer graphics, where they're going over the city or whatever. It's supposed to be a computer representation of the city, when in reality, they built all the models and they just put like fluorescent tape over the models to make it look like.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that going on in terms of the effects, and I think that stuff all looks really nice. It
does.
Obviously, like swooping through like buildings of data or whatever, it's not in any sense
that's
even the visual metaphor. I don't really understand what they're going for half the time.
It's a movie conceit, right? Because we got to get the general audience into trying to understand what this is about. And honestly, that's more of a, again, like you were saying, they reference William Gibson here, where the Gibson is the mainframe they have to hack into or whatever. But I mean, this movie really does draw a lot from cyberpunk, the idea of cyberspace before they're. And this is 1995, so really this is still before the internet as we know it. It's before cyberspace.
It's right at that moment where the internet becomes a thing. And I think that's an important thing. Is it's before kind of like September 1996 is considered the September that never ended, right? Mm-hmm. I get to reveal my like computer nerd history here. I get to like I sometimes don't know that other people don't know this, right? So. In the old days, and I kind of came in like around this time or after this, so I'm not saying but I've read a bunch of the old literature, so I kind of know vaguely the world when I was on Usenet for a couple of years. The whole thing was, if you were like on the internet in 1992, every September you'd get a bunch of kids coming on who had just, who are 18-year-old who got to college, who got their first like internet account, their first like computer accounts. Right. And so they'd show up in your forums. And they'd not know anything, and they'd be little shitty kids, and they would just ruin everything for everybody.
Right.
Well, the internet happened, and like September 1996 is considered the September that never ended, because basically all the kids, they'd come on, and then they kind of learn the rules, and they kind of know how to do stuff, and then like things would settle back down, and then the next year everything would get shitty again around September. Yeah. We are eternally in the September that never ended today.
Right. Exactly.
That's just what the internet is. We've had now 22 years of, that September, and things just keep getting shittier and shittier.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because the visualizations that they create for this, where they're in cyberspace and stuff, that's directly William Gibson cyberpunk stuff, where, you know, they don't do it in this film, but the idea of like cyberpunk, where you're directly connecting it to your head and you're going inside a computer and there's visualizations that you're seeing. Like
Zero Cool literally has like a little headset towards the end of the film, and you can't think that there's anything except they're kind of doing the neuromancer thing, even though they're not saying they're doing it, you know.
Right.
And you're right, computer hacking basically works the way it works in Neuromancer in this film. I mean, I wish they could have just made Neuromancer the film.
Exactly,
that's kind of what they're trying to do here, you know. I mean, it looks. If you just think like, oh, this is Neuromancer the movie, it looks phenomenal for that, you know. It has nothing to do with like any real like computer technology in 1995.
But I mean, Lawnmower Man and Johnny Mnemonic did Neuromancer better than this film does Neuromancer, but this is still the better film than both of those.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So I really like the dynamics between the characters in this film. Matthew Lillard, I'm sorry, that's a genderqueer character, right? Like he is so playing that in this, which is to say he's a club kid in the 90s. And I legit, like I respond, like I love that. I love that that's like an element of this film. I really believe in all the individual characters as people, you know? Yeah. Even the more minor characters, they really feel like, you know, when the dude, you know, he's like, you know, I hit it in the place that I hit that thing that one time. That's such a beautiful little character moment. I kind of read him as you know, somewhat queer or gay, or you know, he's definitely kind of on the effeminate scale,
right? And
then like the idea of sending this guy to jail for kind of nothing, and you kind of see the way he's being catcalled as he's kind of being marched through the jail. I mean, that's a legitimately like terrifying moment for me. Just watching that. I mean, I just want to punch all those fucking assholes. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know.
I think the best thing though is like that character. He doesn't show any fear though. It's like he gets his telephone call and he's like defiant. You know.
No. And that's completely on point for who this character should be as well, because you know, and we got to talk Angelina Jolie, right?
I mean, goddamn, she's absolutely beautiful in this film. Like it's like whoa.
You know, I've seen particularly queer women kind of talking about this film and kind of going like the struggle of like watching, basically discovering their sexuality and like not knowing if they were into John Lee Miller or, you know, Angelina Jolie in this movie. And the answer is both, right? You know, like,
well, yeah, and it's pretty interesting. Like they both basically dress the same too. Like everybody in the film kind of dresses the same, so it's not like there's a defined separation between them necessarily. And I mean, Angelina Jolie's got the short hair too, so it's, you know,
she's got the pixie cut, almost the Rosemary's Baby kind of, you know. You know, no, she's fun. I mean, you know, one thing, you know, this may be a controversial statement, but you know, on the evidence of this film, that Angelina Jolie character, she's gonna go places.
Yeah,
you know, actress. Yeah, she's got some legs on, and she's, you know, got some chops.
The camera. And yeah, again, her acting ability too is pretty apparent in this film as well. But the camera just totally is on top of her all the time. That initial shot where she's introduced, where she comes up to him and's like, "I want to see your transfer papers," and then you get that shot of her lips, which is like,
oh yeah,
it's like, okay.
well, one of my favorite, just like Angelina Jolie hot moments in, you know, anything. I mean, yeah, there are a few of those in this film, but in particular, the moment where, so over the course of the film, the John Lee Miller character, like Zero Cool, has been like fantasizing about Angelina Jolie kind of coming in and fucking him. And then there's the one where the role is reversed, where like you realize she's fantasizing, and she sits up in bed, which we've seen John Lee Miller kind of do in the film, and she sits up, and the camera just watches her for a minute, and
yeah, she's all sweaty, and then she goes like, yeah.
She's like biting her lip and doing, and like it would be very easy for an actress to basically get this wrong, right? To oversell or undersell or kind of, but I totally believe that Angelina Jolie's character in that moment woke up, was confused about the dream she just had, and then was like totally into it, and like that's the moment where she's like, I'm totally fucking that guy.
Yeah,
you know,
it's one of the more convincing wet dreams in cinema history.
one of the more convincing, woman deciding, one of the more convincing horny women in cinema history.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just kind of leave it at that. She's amazing, and it's funny. Like in my memory, the nude scenes, quote unquote, kind of like
it's very brief. Like
they in my memory, it's an extended like 5-minute sequence, but two little knit slips and it's done. And it's wow, this is I'm kind of amazed. Although even just the idea of she's wearing that leather jacket and nothing else underneath. There's
a great tease factor to this film, and I mean, of course, if you wanted to see her looking almost exactly the same, totally nude, you just have to go like a couple years later to like Firefox or something like that, where it's like totally nude. She's just like, titties out.
Well, it's funny, like that's who she kind of becomes for a while. And I know she's seen some. She did some interviews where she basically, I got kind of stereotyped after that film, where like, oh, I'm going to be the tough girl in like the tank top and no bra, and because you are phenomenal at that, Angelina Jolie, and like I mean, not that I'm saying she should have been typecast as that, but also, well, yeah.
But like, and still, she worked her way out of it too. So
she did. So
it's not like she got stuck there.
Right. And obviously built a great career. And she's someone who I think somebody kind of 10 years younger than me or 15 years younger than me kind of approaching her today would, she's just the giant actress who is the classic sex symbol. And I'm really glad that I was kind of born early enough and kind of got to see the Angelina Jolie as the kind of sexy character actress as opposed to the giant star. Because I think that that's kind of the thing with her in this is that, she really is playing a character. She really is kind of doing that thing. She isn't Angelina Jolie in lights. She's just Angelina Jolie, really cool, like person you get to see in a movie. And she's great in this. And also she sells this character. She sells a relationship, but she also sells the kind of sells, not shells. She doesn't shell anything in this movie. Well, she's not a World War I artillery cannon. But sorry, I switched over to whiskey, so I may be slightly slurring here. I apologize.
I think the listeners are used to that shit from us.
This is what happens when we record. We start recording at like 11:30 on a Saturday night,
right?
For TMBDOS.
I should mention. No, I forgot what I was going to mention.
Probably something much more interesting than me just continuing to blather on about like Angelina Jolie's ass in that scene where
Fuck, I really had something to say too, and I forgot.
John Lee Miller's character Murphy, what's his name? Zero Cool.
Zero Cool and
Dave Murphy. Dave Murphy. Yeah. The idea of a kid who broke into some systems and then was kind of a real thing that was happening in the 80s and early 90s. And so again, the hacker crackdown is kind of about it, a lot of that, sort of the legal action that was going around about like kids who they got their first computer and then they were kind of exploring, they stepped on some people's toes, sometimes and legitimate and sometimes illegitimate, sometimes in ways that were really just, I was just exploring, and sometimes some kid was being a shit.
Yeah, and that's a real thing too, is that some of these people got stomped on and silenced and, banned from computers for years, and then other people are like the Fisher Stevens character who became employed by the government to catch these hackers, right?
Yeah, no, and there was this belief among a lot of them is, well, you're breaking laws, but basically when and if the government finds you, they're going to be so impressed by your skills that they're just going to want to know how you did it, right? And so there was this, and particularly among the phone phreaker community. So phone phreaking, and that is spelled with a PH because it goes with phone, right? And these are people, hacking phone systems and like kind of making, so back in the day, kids, you couldn't just call anyone you wanted to on your cell phone. Back in the day, there were these things called long distance charges, and if you wanted to talk to people, and so the idea they would call into these BBSs and then charge the long distance service to somebody else's number, but they would justify it by going like, well, this should just be free. This should, or
Right.
it should be like dirt cheap. This was also the era in which like the Ma Bells and the sort of the big, we are kind of talking about this sort of very, at this point, ancient, sort of tech history.
It really is, because we were sort of on the edge of this world changing.
Yeah.
You and I still remember fucking payphones. You don't see payphones anymore.
No. I mean, you barely even see phones anymore. It's all like cell phones, and like I used to work in an electronics department where I sold physical telephones. It's part of my job. I sold office phones and house phones and stuff. And today, the idea that you could walk into an office supply store and just see a row of phones that you could just buy, it's all cell phones and mobile units today. Like it's just gone.
Yeah, people don't buy that shit anymore. Like, where do you see this stuff now? You see it in flea markets, and the people who buy them are the people who are fucking CB enthusiasts and stuff, who gear up a fucking CB out of it or whatever, So
sure. The character Emmanuel Goldstein, who is Matthew Lillard's character, is named after the founder of the 2600 magazine. Who that wasn't his real name. That was the name he gave himself after the leader of the resistance of the rebellion in Orwell's 1984.
Yeah, 1984. Yep.
Yeah. So that's another very clear reference to sort of a real world character, and then at the end, Matthew Lillard ends up being kind of the guy who's spreading all the information to cyberspace, which is a very that's how hackers operate. Is the people who I want to spread this information to the people who need to know this.
See, that reminded me. I should have did research on this, but there was an incident where a hacker did what the two Asian hackers, Razor and Blade or whatever.
Razor and Blade, yeah.
And no one's ever found out who this guy was. Someone, I guess he was wearing I think it was kind of the inspiration for Max Headroom as well, where he was wearing a Ronald Reagan mask, I think it might have been, or something like that, where he actually hacked into TV signal and did a live broadcast. It was sometime in the 80s, I believe. I'll put it in the fucking show notes and a link to it, but it just kind of reminded me.
You're ringing some vague bells for me, but I don't have a specific thing that I could.
It was it was an early non-computer version of hacking, where someone managed to get on the air and commandeer a TV signal for a short amount of time or whatever, and this broadcast went over to several places or whatever, and this kind of reminded me of that when Matthew Lillard did that, and
I mean it's very plugged into reality in this way that is, despite the fact that it's kind of conflating some subcultures, and it's definitely painting these the hackers in a very idealistic light.
Yeah, they're all heroes. They're not. They're not going to become neo-Nazis on Reddit. And
but in 1995, I don't think that there was everything was potential at that point. It was all. But even then, there were some kind of nasty kind of elements of that.
Yeah, that's the thing. This kind of sugarcoats the reality of the culture.
The reality is also, it wasn't this multi-ethnic, sort of inviting to all people who cared about it. It was a bunch of white kids who really liked computers and weren't necessarily getting school
social
and
interaction and stuff,
social interaction, and that's interesting. And that's but I do wish that the fantasy version better.
It's much more preferable.
But it reflects a lot of communities today. So it is sort of a bunch of. There are kind of geek communities that are full of,
you can see why this movie has sort of persevered throughout the years, why it became a cult classic, because it's kind of inspirational, that kind of ideal, right?
Yeah. I mean, the ideal that the film kind of gives you is fuck the man to the degree that they're fucking you, and information, that knowledge of this world of computers, but also just this world around us, that understanding the world is your gateway to being able to, rebel against it to the degree that it's suppressing you.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, I wish it was even more overt about that. That's the thing that it's going to do, because ultimately it kind of tells more of a kind of straightforward story of a kind of corporate espionage. But I mean, it works. I mean, like, I get why people respond to this so strongly. And honestly, I respond to that. I mean, this was probably my first time actually watching it start to finish that I like really kind of let myself get involved in the film. And kind of aside from my kind of technical kind of knowledge of it, and I really enjoyed it. I really, this film is. I saw this for the first time, possibly via a digital download back when that was done, over dial-up phone lines. I think I probably saw a VHS copy, but I might have actually seen a digital copy the very first time because I was doing this in 1996.
I remember what I was going to say about Angelina Jolie's character, by the way.
Sure.
I like how, she's really hot, and the other characters respond to that like, she's really hot, but at the same time, she's just an accepted member of the group. And there's that scene where they're at the party and she's making out with her douchebag boyfriend who's not into computers at all.
Who's nonetheless wearing a TDK t-shirt because he's a total poser, right?
Yeah, he's a poser, but it's like, I like how they suddenly realize they're being watched. And then the guys are trying to make up an excuse. No, we just came to see your computer. Great fucking laptop, man. Like, your new laptop's awesome. And she immediately geeks out. And it's like, I know, my laptop's awesome, man.
It's a great moment. And it's also like one of those moments where, because what happens is Dade kind of says, hey, burn. Like, he basically like calls out to her like, dude, we're watching you, which kind of elevates him as a character in my mind because, they really did go in there to kind of check out her computer and stuff. And then like suddenly it's taking off her bra and the other dudes are kind of just, we'll just watch this whenever. But, he's a gentleman. He calls it out and he kind of says, hey, we're here. If you want to keep fucking regardless, like, that's fine with me. I would be happy to watch that.
Yeah,
and I personally would be happy to watch that. But you should know we're here, But then she totally gets on with the boyfriend just kind of leaves the movie.
You're not going to do that computer shit again, are you? It's like, fuck yeah, man, we're going to hang out with my friends and do computer shit. So there you go.
I really think she would have been a more interesting. I mean, there is a sense in which, Dade Murphy is the least interesting character among this group, really, any of the others would have been a better kind of lead, but it also just kind of works structurally. I love Lord Nikon.
Where he's kind of Morpheus.
I love that first scene. Of course he kind of gets to be the Magic Negro because he's a black guy in a movie about technology made in the 90s, so of course that's who he is. But I do kind of love the scene where you first are introduced to him. He has the hood over his face. He has the kind of, I'm not, is he cool, whatever,
who's this guy? What have you done?
And then Matthew Lillard like comes in and he's like, "Hey dude, can I sleep on your couch?" And then he like pulls off the hood, and then you realize like, oh no, this guy's really warm. He's a really comfortable guy. Yeah, he's just putting on a character, and it's fine.
He's just another dork. It's like it's almost D&D. Like he's kind of LARPing at that point, right?
It's very D&D, and you kind of get like everybody's kind of doing that. I mean, this is just and that's the thing with these nerd communities should be that, right? They should be this warm, inviting, like we're all the outsiders, but we kind of accept each other because we live in the island of misfit toys. And yet so many of these shitheads, they become Nazis because they ultimately don't really care about people who are not actually just like them. And then they want to gatekeep, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. And I love the fantasy version of this world much more than I love the real version of this world.
Same here. I'll mention the minor character of I think it's Gil or something like that. He's the head of the government department. Where I just liked how he's
a member of the Secret Service, which is real. Yeah. Which is so people think the Secret Service is just like, oh, they protect the president. That's not how the Secret Service got started. They got started off doing counterfeit bills during the Civil War. Because they're dealing with currency, and then when like electronic currency or sort of like wire transfers become a thing, they start kind of regulating that and like enforcing that. And then that's how they become part of computer security and sort of like why they're actually relevant. This whole story is told in the Hacker Crackdown, which you should be reading right now instead of listening to this podcast.
But I love how he's kind of this figurehead character where he doesn't know shit about computers.
Yeah.
But he puts on the airs that he does when he's talking to the media. But then he has all these guys under him who are actual nerds who know computers, and they're trying to explain to him what's actually going on, which I just thought was really true.
I love the Mark Anthony character who is like reading from the Hacker Manifesto, which is a real thing, you know, and just kind of going like, yeah, I'm kind of on board with this, and then his partner going like, bunch of commies.
Yeah. It's like, yeah,
it's great.
And speaking,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're going the same direction here. I was going to speak on Fisher Stevens and Lorraine Bracco. How I think they're done a bit of a disservice in this film. I feel like they're kind of one-dimensional compared to everything else that's going on in the film. I mean, I think they give pretty good performances, and I'll always say this: I think Lorraine Bracco's voice is really sexy, even though her delivery is kind of bland as fuck in this film, I think. But, you know, given what they're given in this film, I think they do a pretty good job. But they feel like an afterthought to me compared to everything else that's going on.
To a degree, that's the film is kind of overplotted, right? Yeah. And it's funny that we've kind of talked about all the stuff around the film more than we've talked about the film itself. But I think the film is overplotted, and I think that really the way that manifests is it never really gives any of our antagonists kind of room to breathe. Like, it's very good at kind of giving us fictionalized but still kind of recognizably real world of the hackers and these kind of teenagers kind of doing the things that they're doing. What it doesn't do is kind of give the kind of other side. And so we've kind of got two primary antagonists. We've got the sort of Secret Service guy, Gil, and then we've got the sort of corporate, like, former hacker turned, you know, dude working for the big company who is Fisher Stevens. Yeah. And I think Fisher Stevens, I think he's good here. I actually really like him here. He sells the character really well. And there is sort of a complicated plot going on around him. And I think that there's an intricacy that gets overlooked sometimes talking about the film, because, like, he's defrauding the company he's working for, at the same time trying to, like, put the whole thing on the kind of quote unquote innocent kids, you know, et cetera. And I really love that aspect of it. But you're right that they are underdeveloped. And it is because we're spending our time kind of doing the, like, heavy plotting thing as opposed to, you know, really kind of letting them breathe. I mean, again, the final third is really where this film should have really lifted off and kind of become something, because it does kind of become about this sort of revolutionary, we're going to change the world by kind of exposing this. And it kind of just becomes these two people are responsible for everything, you know. And Fisher Stevens is sort of
well, actually, he's kind of the asshole in the nerd community that
right?
Well,
he's the asshole, but he's the asshole because he's just after money. It's not even that he doesn't reveal a sort of inner conflict that's kind of going on within this. I mean, you know, and this is where the film, I mean, it's made in 1995 and it kind of does the thing that it does. I don't want to hit it too hard for this, but it doesn't anticipate kind of where all this is going, right? You know?
Yeah, well, he's the angry, entitled nerd. He switched sides and he's still out to screw the system, but he feels like he deserves to get money out of this, and he feels like he deserves to bang the beautiful blonde in Lorraine Bracco, who is just, her character is so one-dimensional. She's just the dummy who doesn't know computers, and she just have a position of power that
she ends up being the one that has stuff explained. She becomes an audience avatar towards the last word, right? You know, like, Colonel, what do you mean? General, Colonel, what's going on? You know, and yet that's the moment where the film doesn't make any technical sense as well. You know, so it does kind of feel like in the extended climax sequence, we really are kind of getting this is the bad version of this film, because it really should have been more of a, like, psychological play between Fisher Stevens and Zero Cool. It should have been kind of about those two characters and this sort of philosophy that they're, you know, but then it just kind of becomes like, you know, we're kind of running around. And there's some good stuff in that, particularly the sequence where the Secret Service, like, they converge upon the phones and we think they're going to capture them, and then it turns out to be No, they've outthought you. They're something else. Like that's a really cool moment in the film. It's like kind of a like a clapping in the theater moment in the film, as far as I'm concerned, because it does kind of play that expectation up. I like, again, kind of watching it now. I enjoyed the film, kind of start to finish. I really kind of I like the way it's shot. I like the characters. I'm kind of on board with it, and I have such low expectations of it that like I kind of let that be the thing. But you're right that it does really drop the ball in terms of kind of really trying to say something about this community and kind of like reflecting some of the realities. And we really haven't seen a good hacker movie. And that's, Sneakers is about as close as we get. Yeah. Sneakers is a good one, which is made, I think, in 95 as well. I mean, that's made like that same era. If it's not 95, it's, 94.
I thought it was a bit earlier than that, but yeah, it's still same era, really.
Yeah, it's I mean, and it's interesting that it's all kind of being made right at that point. Sorry, I'm Googling it now. Oh, 92. Oh, that's interesting.
That sounds more right, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that's the film I saw in theaters, actually. We should definitely cover Sneakers.
Oh, yeah, we should do Sneakers, yeah. And I mean, Sneakers is definitely far removed from hackers in certain ways, because I mean, there you're not really dealing with computers in the same way or anything like that. Like that sort of echoes more back to wiretapping and Watergate and all that sort of thing, right?
I mean, Sneakers is closer to The Conversation as a
exactly,
as a reference point. Yeah,
good pull. Yeah,
it is kind of interesting that given 25 years of this, we still haven't seen like kind of a good portrait of this world on film. There's not one. Like Hackers is kind of the good one, and it's literally just because like it's not absolutely terrible that we sort of
and I think the biggest reason is I don't think anyone in Hollywood has been convinced that there's a good way to make a film about that sequence I mentioned at the end of Hackers, where you see like different people across the world talking to each other with computers. I don't think anyone's managed to convince a studio that we should make a film revolving around these characters who are not living in the same city together. They're actually talking over computers. And
I think about The Guild, which was kind of Felicia Day's project that kind of brought her into focus. And that was totally a project that was about people talking online, essentially. So it can be done, but that was also kind of about we're all kind of gamers and we just kind of do the thing that we do. But it doesn't really get at the core of this sort of aesthetic. And, I think, I'm kind of thinking out loud. It would be interesting to see like what would, a sort of a film about this sort of hacker subculture be. But I think it's also so underground in terms of the kind of people that get to make movies.
They always want to turn it into a political espionage thriller of some sort. Like, like that film Eagle Eye, where it was a computer system following everybody, was it Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman? Yeah. I mean,
it becomes about like, the government is keeping eyes on you, because ultimately, like, that's the really terrifying thing. And I'm not saying that's not terrifying, but it doesn't really start to talk about the subculture of people who are just curious. And that's, you look at the people who are kind of realistically like they're teenagers and they start like exploring these, kind of computer systems. They're curious about what's out there. And then they see like these artificial boundaries between themselves and knowledge, and they just sort of break through that as a way of wanting to know. And this film captures that better than almost anything else on the cinema level. But it still kind of elides that to a large degree.
Hacker and nerd characters for the most part in all these films are marginalized as crazy people or just nerds. And I mean, you either get, again, the Gene Hackman character in Enemy of the State, who's this character who's been on the run for years and hiding and all that. And there's, direct connections between that character and the character he played in The Conversation.
Yeah, it's basically the extension of the same character, right?
Yeah, or you get Kevin Smith's character in the fourth Die Hard film.
Live Free or Die Hard? Is that the one?
As the nerd who's just living in his mother's basement, and he's like in his 30s, and he's still doing this shit, and he's just a lazy hacker. Who's bored by shit.
they just become these like tech guys who give the real heroes the thing that they need to go off and like shoot people in the head. Like that's essentially what
he gives a comedic sounding board for Bruce Willis to, God damn this fucking geek. I just need to know where this thing is so I can go shoot it. Like, this fuck off.
Right. when in reality, like a real sort of online activist is sort of Chelsea Manning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chelsea Manning was someone who, like, in WikiLeaks, I mean, we obviously have our issues with WikiLeaks these days, in terms of what it's become. But the idea of, I've got information I'm going to share online to, reveal terrible things that are being done by, elites is a powerful idea. And yet it's almost as if the capitalist filmmaking system doesn't really want to glorify people who are sharing information. Like, I don't know why I'd say that.
It's a real puzzler, man.
It's a real puzzler. I don't understand why they might have an issue with like people online sharing information for free, like torrent sites, for instance,
Yeah. But I think pretty much I've said all I need to say about this film. I like it a lot. I like it more for different reasons than when I liked it when I first saw it. I just thought it was cool back when I saw it back in the day. But now thinking about it, there's a lot of different reasons that I like it now that I think come out. So I think it's definitely worth a relook. And I think it's a legitimate touchstone kind of classic for its era.
It's a cult classic. It's definitely a cult classic. And check it out. If you haven't, I mean, I can't, 4 people listen to this and 3 of them have talked about Hackers on our Facebook page. So, everybody's seen Hackers, but I sit here talking to you today as someone who has done the complete 180. I really like Hackers. I really, and I wish that it had the sort of courage to kind of do the real thing rather than, not in the last third. The last third, when it becomes kind of generic, kind of movie action sequence, and we're just going to fill the screen with technical bullshit just to sort of amaze the audience. I mean, it works in context. The character bits work, and that's the thing. I think that's the thing that makes the film work is that all the characters are believable, right?
Yeah.
I also really like the mom. I really like Zirkel's mom in this, who. In kind of Googling and looking at people's Wikipedia pages, she died a couple of years ago.
Oh.
Sad thing always, Really my goal here, Lee, is to make this podcast where I get to tell you all the people who have died, in the movies, that all the people that we like. But I really like her as a mom because you really think that she's just trying to raise her son. She knows that he's a genius. She knows that he's got this talent, but also
Well, there's two mom characters in this one. They're both supportive of their sons, even though they know their sons have done criminal things, quote unquote criminal things. It's they're still supportive of their kids, And and in the case of Zero Cool Crash Override, his family broke apart because of being caught doing this shit, and kind of ruined the family structure. But she kept the son and stuck with him, and she's still supporting him throughout all this crap.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and she kind of comes around because like the whole thing is like she wants him to like apply to colleges and be respectable, but through the process of just kind of seeing him kind of become the young man that he is, she understands like, no, my son is a genius. He is doing the thing that he's going to do, and I kind of get the feeling she's on board with the fuck the man aesthetic.
No, she believes in them. There's that scene where they're in the police station, and he turns on the little intercom and hears his mother like basically saying, "No, fuck you. My son's a good kid, and he's doing the right thing, and you guys should not be coming down on him like this." And then there's like the other scene where Angelina Jolie shows up at the house for the first time, and she looks at her and goes like, "Well, I see what he sees in you."
Well, clearly, because how can you not,
she likes the looks and she likes the attitude at the same time because Angelina Jolie gives her attitude at the door, right? It's like
and Angelina Jolie's character's mom is like a best-selling like feminist author as well. There is like all these children, all these kids are children of a great degree of privilege. That's something that kind of runs through the film. One of my favorite little lines, just rewatching it, was the bit where Lord Nikon, when he finds out that, like, oh, you were Zero Cool back in the day. Dude, I thought you were black.
Yeah. Because he's like a hero, and everybody, you know, especially in this case where it's like a faceless hero that anyone can identify with, and then they sort of, you know, they kind of impose their own ideals of what this hero might have looked like and what he's about. You know, it's kind of really cool that way. Yeah. Budget for this was $20 million. Sadly, it was a box office failure, $7.5 million on the returns.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah,
that's rough even for 95.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I'll just go over the DVD stuff for both Short Circuit 1 and 2 and this. If you're looking at Short Circuit, there's an Image Entertainment release from 2004 for DVD, and then there's a 2008 special edition, and Image Entertainment came back with a multi-format, which was Blu-ray and DVD in 2008. Part 2 had a Sony Pictures Home Entertainment release in 2001 as far as DVD goes, and then Image Entertainment also had a 2010 DVD and a 2011 multi-pack, which again was Blu-ray and DVD. As far as Hackers goes, this one had an MGM 1998 DVD release, and it wasn't until Shout Factory came into the picture in 2015 where they released a DVD Blu-ray combo. So those are your sort of best bets. Although I think all these are on Amazon Video as well, if you want to grab them up. So,
sure.
Yeah. But yeah, unless you have anything else, Daniel, we can move to the close here.
I'm good. I'm sure there's more we could talk about, but I think we have covered this well enough. You know?
Yeah.
Hopefully our fans enjoyed this conversation, which wasn't much about the film.
No,
it was on my end, but I think an interesting conversation nonetheless.
Well, yeah, I had plot synopses and I didn't even get into them. I just kind of like overlooked them in the notes because I was so interested in the conversation. So there you go.
The Fisher-Stevens trilogy is done.
It's done. Yeah. Fisher-Stevens, you racist bastard. We're done talking.
Yeah. Fisher-Stevens, I blame you specifically for your shitty portrayals of the South Asian man, you know.
Yeah, so Daniel, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, I am on Twitter at Daniel E. Harper, and you can find all my stuff there. And I also now have a Patreon. I know I have completely sold out.
I actually just became a $1 Patreon.
That's really what you're saying to me is for 4 weeks maximum a month, I provide like an hour or two's worth of content for you, and that's your payment to me. That's kind of where I landed on that.
Here's the thing. I just felt kind of bad because I'm giving money to Kit and James and Jack, so it's like I should probably throw you a bone as well. So
I get that. So much appreciated. If you do want to support this podcast, because Lee doesn't have a Patreon, but if you want to support this podcast and make it better, go support me on Patreon. Basically, that's the thing. I'm looking for people who want to suggest things that they'd like to see from me. By the way, my goal is to kind of just keep doing the thing I'm doing, but also like the whole thing with Patreon is like kick me in the ass and make me start writing. That's right. Kind of the goal of it. But there's not really a lot of content on my Patreon yet. There's not any content on the Patreon yet. Although my plan is by the time you listen to this, there will be a little bit of content there. But yeah, so if you like what I'm doing here, go give me $1 a month. I'd appreciate it because I could use the kick in the ass on that. So cheers.
There you go. Yeah, and for us, you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com, where you can find all of our links to Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and, of course, our Facebook group. Yet again, best way to get in touch with us, They Must Be Destroyed on Sight on Facebook. Till then, I don't know what we're doing next time. I'm kind of hoping it's going to be Enemy Mine, but we'll have to see where Kit Power... where Kit Power's...
if it's not Enemy Mine, I think the other one was... what's the other option at this point? Like, what were
maybe Repo Man?
I'd be down for Repo Man.
Actually, before we started this, I went through my collection to find 80s sci-fi films. So I've got them all sitting here right now.
Hold on. I know you're wrapping up. Like, show me these titles. I'm going to read these titles off because Lee just picked up a giant like stack of movies. So okay, that's Repo Man.
There's Repo Man.
Yeah. The Quiet Earth.
The Quiet Earth.
Yep. Killer Clowns, which I was thinking we should probably cover that. I saw that one time as a kid, and I have not seen it since. And I didn't get it at all when I saw it at like 9 years old or whatever. So, but I'm down for Galaxy of Terror,
which would be our rapiest episode ever.
That's Roger Corman. Is that what I'm getting from this?
That's the Roger Corman.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple of Roger Corman movies coming up on our, when we after we finish the sci-fi series, teaser. We've got some Roger Corman stuff coming up. Dead Space, and you got to move that. The Terror Within.
Yeah, more Roger Corman's.
More
Roger Corman produced shit. Yeah. Anyway, more Roger Corman.
Forbidden World.
Yeah,
sure.
And finally, and this one, I mean, since we're doing 80s and kind of bleeding into the 90s, technically this is a 1979 movie, but
Star Crash.
Yeah,
which we've talked about.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I totally cover that as a full episode. So yeah, no, we've got some titles. I think we're trying to plan on wrapping up this series fairly soon.
Yeah. Maybe not.
Although we'll come back to it. I think what I'd like to do is to wrap up the series fairly soon, kind of do some of the other stuff we want to do, and then maybe come back to it, because 80s and 90s sci-fi is something I can do. Like this is my wheelhouse. I can do this in my sleep. Like these are easy. Yeah. So,
but thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back when we're back. We should be doing another episode next week, because I got the whole fucking weekend off next week. So
one movie, almost certainly. We'll just do either Repo Man or Enemy Mine.
Yeah.
And most likely Repo Man, because it's almost impossible to get Kit Power to set a date within like 6 days, so it's fine.
Yeah, but until then, thank you guys, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Magic people, voodoo people.
you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For more episodes, links to our Apple Podcast site, YouTube, and our Facebook group, as well as other websites and podcasts of similar interests, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. Thank you, drive through, filthy